back. Hope you had a field day.
Bundle your belts as we are about to land at our finale destination, miles away from us. This session will definitely turn out to be an eye opener for all of us present here. Ever since the emergence of man, our beloved Mother Earth has been consistently exposed to environmental threats like pollution and global warming.
When we think of conservation of environment and resources through optimum use, the term that definitely strikes each of our minds is sustainable development.
Being a sustainably developing society means being planet positive. Planet positive, in layman's terms, refers to a process or object with a net positive impact on the environment.
The time has arrived to explore more regarding this burning issue.
So, as the caravan of Inspiro 2 4.0 proceeds, the family of IEEE ADIT is tremendously enthralled to welcome Mr. John Heavens as the keynote speaker of our venerated panel. Mr. John Heavens is currently designated as Sustainability Practice Lead at IEEE Standards Association.
Furthermore, he is Executive Director of the IEEE Global Initiative on Ethics of Autonomous and Intelligent Systems.
He has founded several projects like the Hackathon Project, which aims at enlightening people about the value of positive psychology.
Adding to his bucket of expertise, he is an author, activist, and an extremely eminent TEDx speaker.
Without taking much time, we request John Sir to illuminate our participants on the topic Becoming Planet Positive, Sustainability for Technology and a New Society. The dais is all yours, sir.
Thank you. And first of all, I'm really honored to be here. I want to thank you both and for everyone who allowed me to be here. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen, so that should work. Just 1 second. Okay. And I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes, and then I'm happy to take questions. And if you see me drink coffee, it's only because it's early. That's just a good way to keep speaking, is to stay awake and lively. So as my hosts or our hosts were kind enough to say, I'm going to be speaking about how to become planet positive today, and how sustainability for technology and a new society is something that I'm going to recommend throughout the course of my talk. I should say I work for IEEE. I'm the practice lead, the sustainability practice lead for the IEEE Standards Association. But what I say is also coming from John, from my heart and mind, and doesn't necessarily represent all of IEEE, because as you know, IEEE is a very big place. That said, you already heard a little bit about my background. I did run a nonprofit, as was mentioned. I spoke at TEDx. I worked at Porter Novelli, a big PR firm, a couple other places, and I used to be an actor. That's me in a movie called The Thomas Crown Affair. And I show this to you not just because it's fun to see me in a picture a lot younger, but is to, my background, a lot of it comes from storytelling. And what we need right now, as much as we need anything else with regards to sustainability, is a new story about ourselves and about the planet. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. I'm also an author, as was mentioned. My most recent book, Artificial Intelligence, Embracing Our Humanity to Maximize Machines, is the book that brought me to IEEE. It's a book about looking for a code of ethics for artificial intelligence. And when I was writing that, I found out about IEEE and then spoke for IEEE at a big conference called in the United States called South by Southwest, and was honored that when I came to IEEE to talk about creating a code of ethics for artificial intelligence, that idea had already been started. and I was able to be a part of a process to help drive a process, which I'll explain about more in just a moment. So, a few things in terms of challenges that I'm sure you're all aware are happening, and certainly in India and in the United States and around the world. Global climate change. Um, Now, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is the science of the United Nations. There's a division or an area called, the initials are IPCC. And the key thing that these scientists are saying, which you may have heard about, is this idea of trying to achieve net zero by 2050, the year 2050. And net zero means if our climate gets to 1.5 degrees Celsius or higher, and I have some of the stats later. And the main point here I want to make is that we're heating the planet, where if we get to that goal, it's almost impossible for a lot of the Earth's systems to be restored back to places of health where both the planet and we can be healthy. So that's why this idea of climate change, the reason it threatens our health and well-being, is because systems in the planet are all connected, and we are connected to the planet. Certainly, of course, we breathe air, we drink water, but there's also both a mental and a spiritual connection to the planet and ourselves, which I'll talk more about in a moment. So our planet is in urgent need of and ready for solutions that address these challenges. So I'm going to have sort of two parts to my talk. Part one, I'm going to get a little specific into this idea, as my hosts already mentioned, of how to become planet positive. And then I'm going to talk about the nature of well-being and this idea of a society that we can work to achieve, where technology, and of course working in IEEE, which I'm honored to do, technology is a key part of how to make these changes. However, from a multidiscipline standpoint, meaning not just engineers or scientists, but human rights experts, social scientists, ethicists, marketers, accountants, people coming together first to address these huge issues regarding the planet. Once they all speak and come up with solutions, that's then where technology will be most effective. Right now, there's incredible technology, to be clear, helping with regards to the planet and the people in the different areas where that technology is being used. And IEEE already has dozens and dozens of projects and volunteers, many in India, doing incredible work in energy and sustainability and other areas helping the planet. So I want to be very clear to say that is incredible and wonderful. But there's an opportunity and a need for all those different projects and the people working on them to know what each other's doing in a much more clear way, because the planet is connected as a system. What happens in the United States with the negative emissions that happen goes into the atmosphere, and of course then it affects India and the rest of the world. Supply chain, what's built in America or other parts of the world, comes to India or goes to the global south, to the Amazon region, and potentially harms rainforests. And the Amazon rainforest accounts for about 1/3 of the entire Earth's oxygen. So it can be confusing, understandably, because it's so hard to picture how my actions, and I live in New Jersey, near New York City, could harm people in India. It can seem strange. But when we come to realize that our actions not only are harming the planet, but that our individual actions, the choices we make, what we buy, if we drive an electric car versus a gasoline powered car, All these different choices on an individual level need to be reflected at a societal level, government and business, because that's the only way, coming together with a new story about the planet and ourselves, that we can become planet positive and truly have a chance to make it to not just 2050, but 2030. All right, so let me explain that. I'm just going to take a quick sip of coffee. So I was mentioning from the United Nations, this concept of 2050 and being net zero by 2050. Net zero simply means there's no more negative emissions going up into the atmosphere, harming the atmosphere, making the planet grow warmer. Very, very simplistically, the idea is that here's our planet, here's the atmosphere, the carbon from emissions that makes the planet hotter. That's because we're making it so that the heat comes back to the planet's surface and heat it, because we're not allowing carbon to come back naturally into the soil, etc., in ways that it normally had been doing for, well, since time began. So what we're hearing from these specialists, the United Nations, is it's actually 2030, meaning 7 years from right now, 7 years, where we have to reduce the negative carbon emissions by 50% to be net positive. And now net positive means we can't just create technology, cars or what have you, so that they don't harm the planet, right? Meaning net neutral is a term you may have heard. Net neutral, because the planet essentially needs healing or restoration, isn't enough. We all have to do more activities to heal or restore the planet and our actions and everything we build to be net positive. And the reason 2030 is such a key date versus 2050 is because of systems thinking and because of exponential effects. For instance, if a company or a government said, well, we're gonna change by 2050, and in 2040 we're gonna plant trees in a huge, massive region of our country or what have you. Well, by 2030, 7 years from now, there's a good chance that the place, that company, where they wanted to plant trees, even if they really wanted to, it was their intention, versus saying they were going to and then not do it. The trees, first of all, would only maybe have 10 years to grow from 2040 to 2050, which may not be time enough for the trees to grow. And second of all, I know in the United States, there's been so many forest fires because of climate change that planning on aspects of the planet still being here in 7 years is not good science. And that's the thing about IEEE and the engineering community, which I respect so much, is I really want to make a lot of this talk about either science or logic or physics, and how if we start now to make drastic changes, really hard changes on an individual level too, things like me personally in New Jersey, I'm now trying not to eat beef, for instance, because of the whole supply chain for beef. I just bought an electric car yesterday. I'm actually, after this talk, going to go pick it up. I'm trying to compost. And whether these seem not silly, but too small, I live in the country, the United States. I think this is the right statistic. We have, I think, 20% of the world's population, but because of consuming what I buy and how I live, all Americans, America produces, I think it's 80% of the negative emissions for the world. So it's actually exactly me or all of consumers. We need to change. And by the way, one thing to change is the word consumer. I don't like the word consumer because it defines me or you listening as only having worth or value while you buy things. That makes sense? Or while you're consuming. as compared to, say, calling me a customer. Like, I love a lot of the, the companies I buy from. I'm happy to pay the money, happy to. But I don't want to be defined on this planet as consuming alone. Anyway, so the three main recommendations here. One is be specific to become planet positive. As wonderful as it is to say, let's be more sustainable, and I mentioned specific things I'm doing. Planet positive means I am committed to giving back to the planet more than I take away. Not just trying to not harm the planet. I have to give back more. Not just because I'm a good person, but because if I don't make these drastic changes, then there's a shot. It is apparently scientifically certain that by 2050, 2060, 2070, will the world still be here? The world will be here. And I use the pronoun she for the planet. She'll be just fine. She was fine before people came here. I want to have my children and my grandchildren and your grandchildren for 7 generations or more be able to not just live on this planet, but change the way we think about her. The planet is not just ours to extract from and then continue to harm the planet. That means I am actually harming you if I ignore the planet, because I will do things in this connected system that could harm you. I don't want to harm you. I don't want people in other countries to harm me. And more importantly, I want to say, what's the question? What's the story that we can all have in India and the United States, certainly in IEEE, when the story becomes by 2030, we can do this only because we're coming together as people first and saying the technology can help solve these things, but only after. I mean, it's already helping, but if we can come together first and say, well, are all the people here speaking, brainstorming, thinking about this problem? And by all the people, I mean marginalized populations, people who are poor in the United States or around the world, indigenous populations who know so much, I'm being very general, but about how to heal the planet. Men, women, people of all races. In the United States, 80% of the climate devastation that's been happening in the past number of years most directly affects Black, Brown, and Latin populations. So is this a political issue? Is this a human rights issue? Of course it is. However, is it also a design issue? Yes, it is. To the technologists and the engineers I respect so much, this is a clarion call to say, if there was 80% of all Americans who say needed to get electricity, but for whatever reason, those 80% of people all lived in cities, then the design constraint, one of the design constraints would be, well, we have to build our technology so it can be accessible in cities. That's not a moral issue. It's not a political issue. It's a design issue. Well, if 80% of the people who right now, today, 2022, are most affected negatively by the climate, don't give it a term like climate change, the storms that have already started happening over and over in the past few years, if they are Black, Brown, and Latin populations, then we have to address that first in the States. And people will say, well, that's not a design issue, or it's not what IEEE does. In one sense, what do you mean? Of course we do. We are advancing technology for society or humanity. And we have the opportunity, and I believe the mandate, to help people with this technology. So anyway, you can tell the coffee's kicking in. Part 1 is be specific. Reduce 50% carbon emissions by 2030. And this term of what's called regeneration. If you get the chance, I'm not sure if it's only in English or multiple languages. I think it's been translated hopefully into multiple languages and dialects that would be accessible in India. There's a wonderful documentary called Kiss the Ground. and I believe part of it is shot in India. But they show these areas of the world that were once desert. This term called desertification, meaning areas that were green, but then the land has died and it becomes desert. And then this idea of land regeneration or regenerative farming can restore the ground and the area, the ecosystems, the biospheres to look as green as any garden you've ever seen. It's glorious to see how technology and how people today can take land in an area that is literally dead, dead to the point where you pick up the ground, the dirt rather, and it's just a few weeds and you pour water through it and water just goes right through it. In the movie, the documentary, they show a couple different areas. I think one's in the United States and one's in India, where they show the before and after pictures. The before is a desert, it's brown. And then the after is these beautiful green, lush areas. And what's so exciting in the movie, they point out that when the ground becomes desert, then people have to leave. People starve, they can't eat, and they leave. And that becomes an issue of immigration. And then the immigration can also lead to what's called like sort of a climate-based racism or inequality. So I'm a climate activist in one sense. And again, I'm speaking for myself, not all of IEEE. But the climate activist part of it is to say the societal issues that we're facing have to be addressed either first or in conjunction with the aspects of what can be addressed with technology. Or the technology won't work in the sense of I can turn this phone on, it turns on, so it's functional. But if the people where I want this technology to use can't access it, or even worse, if the technology, I haven't worked with them to say, how will this work? It might cause them harm. And it certainly will probably cause the planet harm. So part one is be specific. The second is to be accountable. In general, when technology is built today, the main thing that, and I used to work in this public relations firm, as I mentioned, the main thing that companies are accountable to is, of course, creating a product that brings value. But sometimes you create a market. So it doesn't necessarily mean someone needs something. It's okay that they want it. And profits mean the company survives. So that all makes sense. However, exponential profits, meaning where shareholders demand ever-growing profits at a core design level. And by the way, I don't mean to ever come off as angry. I just get passionate. But at a core design level, there is no limit to the idea of exponential growth. There is no limit to the idea of how much money a company could make. There is a very specific limit to the planetary resources and the human well-being or resources that could facilitate that happening. So if you think about the big picture of design, a lot of times our minds are here, right in there. We build technology, and success is we don't want to harm somebody, of course. We want it to create profit. But then the main metrics of success are GDP, gross domestic product, which boils down to at a company level, our shareholders may, not all shareholders, but in general want as much money as possible, as fast as possible. This then means companies, there's often talk of innovation with companies, but that pressure to always get something in the market fast and have exponential growth, that's what hinders innovation more than a lot of things. Moving faster, techniques like agile marketing, they've helped with this process of getting things to market faster. But the real societal question is that what's best for society? And if what's best means, how about the planet? And how about us as people? Right now, today, is that larger system of moving so fast and growing so much, being the first thing, always the first thing, always, every quarter. What are your numbers? That's the question. What are your numbers? What are your fiscal numbers every quarter? And now I am mad. You should be mad. Not at the people, not at the idea of business, certainly not the beautiful technology, but who said this was right 60, 70, 80 years ago, or for so long? Who said this is right? That the planet and taking care of her and taking care of our loved ones comes after exponential growth happens. Who said that? Mainly white guys, right? Americans, probably. But the point is I don't want to make this about race or whatever. This is the opportunity to tell the story for society to say, what happens if we switch everything around? And by the way, so many marginalized people, indigenous people, since time began when there were humans, we're already doing this. Technology can facilitate this today. But what happens? Just picture, if you would, for a minute, the beauty of this idea that the first thing we ask when we build technology is, how does this technology increase planetary flourishing? If not exponentially, at least how does it do it really fast to heal the planet? And can you imagine if the first question when I build this phone or any technology is, hold on, using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or ESGs, which stands for environmental, social, and governance metrics, which just simply means a certain metric indicator that says when I build this phone, I have to measure that the hardware, the actual outside of the phone, the technology, doesn't end up in the Amazon, for instance, sitting in a pile, diminishing the air that we breathe, right? And while that may seem like a natural thing to think about, unless we start asking companies and governments and ourselves to increase the planet and then have measures that we're accountable to, then it's not being measured, and we're where we are, where the planet by 2030, 2040, 2050 will not sustain human life anymore. Like the term sustainability, a lot of times I think people think is this sort of happy, let's dance around and feel good about ourselves and be green. It's a term that also means last. Exponential growth and planetary health do not mix. They are not mixing for the majority of the planet. Design constraint, not working. Prioritizing exponential growth first. That's why the planet is where it is. That's why during COVID, globally, you know one thing we all share? And by the way, I don't mean to be negative. I'm going positive, hence the title. We share depression. We share loneliness. We share key issues of saying, why is it that caregiving is so deprioritized, certainly in the United States, that outside of the disease part of COVID, the huge part of our human selves has diminished. There's been so many wonderful things during COVID as well. But the point is why it's not improving is because it's not measured. It's not prioritized. And I do get angry and passionate about this because the urgency of this means the only thing we can do is to come together and tell the story of what would happen if by 2030, the planet was prioritized first in every piece of technology you knew and were accountable to. The first quarter after you build this phone, questions like, how is it helping the Amazon? How is it taking carbon from the atmosphere? How is it ensuring that land can be regenerated all around the world? What about the supply chain? And then if it's harming the planet, the company making the technology, the individual, buying a certain product is asked to stop. Okay, let me just let that sit for a second. I'm not sure in different parts of India, coming from the United States, what I just said, I was a EVP at a top 10 PR firm. I work for some of the biggest companies in the world. What I just said was, if you build a technology and you know it's harming the planet, and then there was a metric, an indicator saying it's harming, then you should stop building it. That statement That statement is what most people think is impossible. Stop building something, but we built it. It's out there. And look, I get it. I'm a geek. I wish I could build a third of the things I see the experts that I know build. It's not about them in one sense. It's not about these wonderful people or the technologies. It's this deeply challenging knowledge that around the world, in general, at least with GDP, gross domestic product, this highest level of indicator that we all have looked to for so many years, the indicator mainly says what is valued by society is exponential growth in only financial and economic terms, meaning what the only stuff that's even measured in a big sense, basically, is those economics and finances. All right, I have like 28 other slides, and I've stayed on this one for 20 minutes. Okay, equitable. Sustainability by design must be multidisciplinary. And there, I've already covered this a little, but the process that I helped run called Ethically Aligned Design, this big paper, we brought together social scientists and ethicists with data scientists, with engineers to talk about artificial intelligence. It was incredible because what we had then, I'll give you an example, is one of the chapters on values, actually recognizing human values in the technology. One of the chapters was talking about this idea of a hospital and how you create AI or machine learning technology for a hospital. Most of the time what happens is people will build some amazing piece of, say, software using machine learning algorithms to analyze a patient's health. But the system where that phone that you have an app that tells you about a patient's health, the system involves humans and not just the person that's sick and not just the doctor that is trying to help that person. It's the nurses and it's the family of the patients. So for instance, there was a big situation in the United States where someone had put a screen on a robot, but the robot was really just sort of a TV monitor on a radio controlled stand. And it sort of had like Skype or Zoom on it. And then a doctor, as it were, could roll into a room remotely, wherever he or she was, or they were stationed, and roll into a room and talk to a patient or the doctor or nurse physically in the room. So there's this precedent where this happened, and a doctor, I forget his name, rolled into a room and saw his colleague and started talking to her about the patient who was in the room and saying, this patient's going to die pretty soon. Not realizing, because the screen hadn't taken in the whole room, that the patient's family was right there. And so it doesn't make a difference in that example that the doctor didn't want to harm, or the people creating the technology didn't want to harm, do no harm and all that. But they didn't create the technology thinking, well, what are all the different scenarios that can happen where we have to prioritize human well-being, as well as things like exponential growth and, solving the problem of the sickness the patient was dealing with. Well, part of the issue is the patient's family was there and they heard the doctor say the patient is dying, and were understandably very upset that they didn't realize that the person who was sick could also hear them and the family was there. So those systems of the human well-being are reflected with people. All right, now I'm just going to go through a lot of slides. So thanks. All right, this is a lot of words. The whole point here, IEEE may be doing some stuff with XPRIZE, this wonderful, XPRIZE, if you know it, Elon Musk has this company focused on this. Basically, it's this idea of what's a moonshot challenge? What's the biggest, most aspirational thing you can think of? And with XPRIZE, they usually have $50 million as an opportunity to design. This is the same thing. I already gave us the challenge. How to become planet positive by 2030 and to get to 50% of negative emissions and to have the whole world be focused on regenerative farming, but regenerative everything. Like, wow, that's hard. Yes, it is. But we have to get there. So what's the story of how India, the students that, are my two hosts, and the students who run this part of IEEE, and me and the work I'm leading, and then anyone that we know in all the different IEEE regions, we can say the same way this X Prize, you just say this could never happen. How do we say, can that happen for the planet? How do we get to be net positive? Be accountable, like I already mentioned. This is hard. I don't want to be accountable. One thing that's accountable is like losing weight, right? Everyone's like, I want to lose 40 pounds, but then you get on the scale and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have eaten the chocolate last night, right? So being accountable is hard, but you have to be, especially as scientists and engineers, we cannot just build technology with, of course, I'm being very simplistic to make my point. Of course, engineers are always thinking about not harming. It's a core part of who they are. So I'm saying, standing on the shoulders of giants, saying to those giants, where you may be trapped in this myopic vision that the wealth and the worth of the planet and people can only be measured in financial, economic ways, it is not enough. Widen your lens. The constraints have to have the planet and people first. And it's not because that's a nice thing to do. It's the only way people stay here. It's the only way my grandchildren and anyone, people your age, young people, the way that you and your grandchildren walk on the earth in health and joy. So this is not a let's think about it hard thing. This is the only thing we can do. So what a wonderful time to dream. What a wonderful story to say in 2022, the veil of ignorance and the veil of whatever else, greed, fear. I'm terrified of a lot of this stuff, meaning, how do we get to 2030? But you know what it means? I know for me, it means I have no choice. There's freedom in that. You want to know why? Because I'm a dad. I'm a father. And anyone who says that, hey, John, what you're dreaming of, we can't get to 2030. My answer is, first, well, what other options are there? If there's other solutions, let me know. I am happy to be wrong. And, I don't necessarily want to stop eating beef or, not silly, but things like that. But I have to. And secondly, I am fighting for my children. I am fighting for your children. I am fighting to say the systems that got us here are not working. And I'm not interested in making the systems that got us here work for those systems. If you hear someone say like, how do we make the planet work for business? Not the right question, not the story that's going to get us to where we're getting to. The question is, how can business, how can government, how can we, with these accountable metrics, transform the way we think and live and say, by 2030, how do we make the planet come first and people come first? Then any of the resources, money or otherwise, that come after those two questions are answered, they come to fulfill the first two things, not because it's a nice thing, but if we want equitable, if we want equality among people, it can't be 10 or 20% of all the wealth is held by a tiny portion of people. And then we go, yay, 20% of the people own the wealth of everything. Now in that little tiny opportunity left in that system, we've accepted that system. Society said, I'm okay with that. 20% of the people and the planet is going to ruins and people are suffering, but let's try to make what we can work and what we have left. My answer is no. I'm not saying hurt any person. I'm not saying by any means the people that have that money are not honorable and doing great things, but also they're part of the story. Think of their part of the story. Billionaires or whoever else, their part of the story is to say, you know what? Maybe I only need $1 million or one house or two houses. Cool. Thank you. You have the chance to be the heroes for all of humanity and the planet. And then that becomes part of the story that seems impossible. Do you remember in 2023 when all the billionaires said, The main thing we have to do is be a part of the story that says those resources go to replenish the water and the air and to deal with the carbon versus keeping more of that wealth. Well, these metrics are how to help do that, to help those people. I'm not angry at them, as it were. I'm passionate because I'm saying, look, now we have these metrics. They've been here for a while, but they help us measure and they help us say these other things are critically important. All right, I ended up talking with about 4 slides. I have like 20 others, and I'm supposed to be done pretty soon. But ethically aligned design is this big process focused on artificial intelligence and ethics I helped drive for about 5 years. And we have to be multidisciplinary. That's what we learned with IEEE with this process. And in this case, we had the first version of a big document, and then we asked for feedback. And a lot of the feedback came from Asia, specifically Japan, South Korea, and China. And people said, this is a great document, but it's very Western. It's very Western. And I didn't know what that meant. You want to know why? Because my bias still is to a large degree, of a Westerner. And then we had people say, well, what about Ubuntu ethics from Africa? What about Confucian ethics from China? What about Shinto ethics from Japan? What about the different cultural aspects of multiple different areas of India that deeply affect how people live their lives? How have you accounted for how artificial intelligence embedded in this technology will affect those people? It was a fantastic question. And the answer is, I don't know. John wouldn't know. So you know the answer? Ask those people. Ask all people. It's really hard. But you know who can do that? You know, one of the only organizations on the planet that can do that? It is us. It's IEEE. So in this question of how do we get to 2030 for this planet, especially with young people, right? Especially with people, I'm going to say, I'm not sure all the different ages, but I'm 53, but people who are under 40. It's so exciting. It's so exciting to me. I'm honored to work with young people. You want to know why? Because I feel like I'm part of the generation, because I am. That I didn't mean to, but I caused a lot of the problems that I know we have to fix. And especially my children who are teenagers. It is beyond a mandate. I don't want to harm my kids. I don't want you as young people or anyone to face anything except just living your life on a planet that we take care of first, with people we take care of first. So maybe I'll just do this. I'll end on this slide. I had 20 other slides, but you got me talking, and I wanted to have time for questions. How can we be planet positive? This idea of strong sustainability by design. Strong is not just, a word I chose for saying, let's be, fervent. Strong sustainability is the recognition versus what's called weak sustainability, that no matter what we do with the economy, picture 3 circles. The economy is at the center circle. And then the next circle is society. And then the circle that surrounds everything is ecology, or the biosphere, or the planet. Strong sustainability is a design truism that recognizes in those 3 circles, what can happen is you could take away the economics. A certain country, for instance, like the Maldives, any of the island nations that are sinking. Is climate change real? Well, multiple islands in the world right now are sinking. I spoke to someone yesterday who lives in near Jakarta, and she told me that they're moving the government from Jakarta because Jakarta, Indonesia, is sinking. I have a friend in Miami, Florida. Miami, Florida is sinking because the water is rising due to climate change. We can ignore that or say that's not what's happening, but we ignore it, continuing to say, I guess it's okay that these other systems happen while these things happen. Anyway, strong sustainability means if you remove the economy, society and the planet are still there. But those people now in the Maldives, right now, 2022, as I'm speaking on Sunday morning in my time in New Jersey, right now, the climate change is almost ending their world, ending by sinking where they live. I live in New Jersey. I'm in my son's room, in my basement that flooded from a storm that normally doesn't happen, right? I'm in upper middle class or whatever economic terms we always use to talk about everything. Who cares? The storms affect everyone, but it affects people who are struggling with poverty in the United States, brown, black, or of Latin descent, and the indigenous more than anyone. So including them into things is critical. But in those circles, if the economy's gone, the society is there. Well, guess what? I started the talk by saying this. If people are not prioritized above exponential growth and profit in isolation, right? Nothing wrong with profits, but where profit is the only thing or the first thing, then that means we are saying we don't care about our people. We are prioritizing exponential growth. That is a choice. And if we remove society, you know what circle remains? You know who remains? She remains. The planet doesn't need us. We should be stewards of her. We should be honoring her. It's not a question of, I wonder if we should prioritize the planet. We should consider her as a person who we now are maligning and harming. The planet, if it was a human, the human rights violations would be massive. So I'm going to end on a positive note so I can answer some questions. I've already said, be specific, be accountable, be equitable. And what a wonderful time with all the passion and sometimes anger I get towards the current system. Just take a deep breath with me and imagine what happened if every meeting from this point forward started with a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement means recognizing the indigenous people or the people who were first on the land where you were. In India, I don't know what that means. But that acknowledgement is not just saying, hey, the people who first lived here deserve our honor. It is recognizing the land. That's why it's called a land acknowledgement. It's saying first, we are thinking of the planet. That's why it's so powerful. And when in our minds, we can shift from this ever increasing exponential growth, right? On the individual level, GDP up here means on some level, most of us are like, I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to get this much money, this fast. And that's how I define that I'm a good person. No. The story is we have worth because we're here. Someone's born in India. Someone's born in the United States. Someone's born into an indigenous community. Someone's born into a rich community or a house, right? You already have worth. And if that worth is measured in the care we give each other, the care, which isn't about money, if that's measured in how we take care of the planet, and then we think first in our meetings about the land and about people, then these technologies, how we design them, will utterly be transformed, utterly be an opportunity for a positive story where we know with the assurance of designers and engineers and those who love empiricism and exactitude. Accountability won't be a hand slap. Oh, I'm building something, I'm going to get punished. It will be a joyful, reverent, beautiful opportunity to know I am building this, taking care of her. And I am building this, taking care of my children and taking care of you, young people. If you have children, your children. And it's not about John. I'm saying all of us. Think about what it means for your own sense of worth. If you're building knowing, I'm using these metrics and these indicators to be specific so that by 2030, even in the next 3 or 4 years, like what happened with COVID, so many fewer flights, we saw what can happen when we let the planet have a chance to take a deep breath and heal. It's the same for us. So I will close again and just say thank you so much for this opportunity. And it's not my dream to get to 2030 and be safe and healthy. It is the absolute only way that we move forward with a long-term future. And I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of being angry just for the sake of being angry. But I will not rest saying anymore when I speak that the current system we're in economically, monetarily, globally, is something that can be sustained. It just isn't working. It's not working. Good engineers, good designers say, why is it not working? Well, it's not just the actual technology. It's not about the technology. It's about the system and the society that would say it's okay for these harms to continue societally. And the answer is it absolutely, morally, ethically, design-wise, is not. It won't work. It ain't working. So what a wonderful time to figure out, coming together, putting her first and people first. How can we make it work right now? And then that story we can tell. Can you imagine 3 years from now, this event, 4 years from now, this event? The stories we can tell joyfully together. I can't wait. I can't wait. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I know it went a little over, so thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. It was a really eye-opening session, and I really think that we all really need that coffee, sir, because the energy was really great, sir.
Yes, sir.
And sir, if you are okay, we'd like now to begin with the question answer round.
Sure.
Sir, first of all, I would like to ask that, as you mentioned, you have written the book Heartful Intelligence, and you were saying about code of ethics that are mentioned for AI. Sir, what do you think about what are the codes of ethic that is mentioned for AI? And sir, do you really think that it is necessary for the way which we are going, for the future which we are aiming, sir?
Sure. Well, an ethically aligned design, and I'll put the I know only you can see what I type you, I mean, meaning with the two hosts, but if you can share this, you can download ethically aligned design at the link,
Yes, sir.
ethicsinAction.ieee.org. The first three principles, the first number one is human rights. So that might seem strange, like shouldn't it be accountability, or shouldn't it be something about machine learning and how to do code? And the answer is, what happened was, all the people that worked on the document, there were about 700 people over the course of 3 to 4 years, voted in different ways to say what the order of the principles would be. Human rights is the first. So that means any technology that's built, not using something in America, I think globally, but the business, there's something called the RUGI principles, which are ways for the business. Then you're not building technology the way that, IEEE, because the paper was mentioned at the board level in 2019.
Yes, sir.
So the principle of human rights is the first one. So that means if you're building a technology and it might harm some human rights, then don't build it. The second is well-being metrics. I mentioned that in my talk, meaning whether it's SDGs, and you guys can still hear me okay?
Yeah, so we
Oh,
can hear you.
no, just checking. If you're building something, it should be built knowing we're going to increase SDG number 6 or whatever, and that we're not just harming, but we're helping. And the third is data agency. With artificial intelligence, data is really the critical thing that makes up an algorithm. And
Yes,
agency means the humans whose data is being used have to know about it to such a degree that they understand that it makes up who they are. It's their identity. It's not just this random stuff you're sharing. And
Yes.
so whether it's centralized, decentralized, blockchain, DAOs, whatever it is, it means that I really have to be in charge of my data. Those three things first, then designing the technology is completely different than just saying, let's build the technology. And then later, oh, we forgot to deal with the privacy, or, I think it is harming the planet. That's the same logic that now I just told you about sustainability. The first things are to focus on planet and people, then you build the technology.
Yes, sir. I really also like your story about the hospital where they used AI and how they used it, sir. It was really a thoughtful one. Sir, I also wanted to know more about the hackathon project that you were working on.
Oh,
What is
thank
it?
you. That's a nonprofit that I ran for about 3 years. And it was focused on these well-being metrics, really teaching people mostly because people don't, a lot of, at least in the States or where I've been around the world quite a bit, but when I speak, it's always in English. I speak a little bit of Spanish, and more often than not, people don't even know that like Bhutan created this idea of gross national happiness. Or if they've heard of it, at least in the United States, they kind of go, oh, that's nice, happiness. But they're very specific metrics. Bhutan lowered the carbon in their country because of changing the objective practices of how they treat the planet. So we can think that it's a funny term. I don't, but they actually prioritize the planet and things like time, how we spend time. That's fascinating because in the United States in general, we don't, the main way we value time is productivity. What did I get done? What did I get done? And if I say, well, I spent a wonderful day with my son, then people go, oh, that's nice. What did you get done? And my answer is, you didn't hear me. My life increased like that because I took a walk with my son. Yeah, but what did you get done? They're not necessarily stupid, but up here, the only metric they've been given is money and productivity, where time has to be valued in. Well, I wrote a book. I spoke for TED. I saved the planet. I did this, like, did you do something that increased your well-being? And in this case, your son or other people. That can be measured. So the time now is to say, especially with things like COVID and human depression, the measurements are there. They're horrifying around the world, depression, loneliness. And the societal question, like I mentioned, is to say, are we going to continue, it's not like we're, continue to ignore that and say, it's too bad about the depression. Let's build something to fix it, right? Not just technology, but let's build something, versus go, oh, it's really hard. It's really hard when people you care about are sad, simply. It's really hard when we're lonely. So that it's really hard to sort of say, like, along with the technology and other things that can help deal with that, it's really hard to then say, as a society, can we say we're going to prioritize the care of other people? But it's the only answer. Like, what's harder is accepting a current 2022 situation where loneliness and isolation have gotten to the point they have, where people even take their own lives. And again, I don't want to end in a negative sense, but like, what a wonderful opportunity for society to go, whoa, wake up call. Especially young people. I'm pointing to you guys because you're younger than me. Am I doing something, or is my generation doing something to harm young people? Then you know what the opportunity and the need and mandate is to go, how do I not harm? And to say, look, this is really hard. It's hard to look within and say, how have I messed up with people I care about? Or how have I, if I struggle with loneliness? But if I don't, and that's what my last book was about, artificial intelligence, knowing our own values to help other people in the machines we built, then we're just running forward with our eyes closed, ask the planet, and people suffer. And no more, not working. So let's stop.
So we would now like to take a question from the audience. There is a comment from Dhruvin Singh Rathod. He would like to know that should we celebrate our own personal accountability metrics at home or at offices? If yes, how? And what are the things that should be considered while creating it at home or office?
Oh, it's a great question. In terms of sustainability at home, some of the things I mentioned are a pretty big deal. If we all did them, I love eating beef. So I don't mean to be culturally offensive to anyone in India, in the States, like farmers who raise cattle. I'm not interested in saying that anyone who is associated with beef is doing something wrong. What I'm saying is that the actual animal, the methane that comes from their bodies, is one of the key accelerants to the planet going in a negative way. So if I eat less beef, it gives the opportunity for farmers to do what's called regenerative farming, which I mentioned, which really, watch this movie, Kiss the Ground. It's really a fun, meaning exciting, positive watch, because the personal accountability of me kind of releasing the pressure from all that I buy means that there's this opportunity for, especially in America, but cattle more often than not are kept in a pen and treated in a pretty unpleasant way. So their lives, from an animal rights standpoint, are negative. But then they're fed food that their bodies aren't supposed to eat. The chemicals or the different, like just corn or whatever that they eat. It's not what they're supposed to eat. So you're forcing these animals to be already suffering and then give them bad food. That bad food means that when I eat the beef, I get sick. And this cycle, it's frankly just ludicrous. And it mainly continues to exist because of subsidies and money going to certain people. And the question is, I don't want those people to stop making money. I'm not interested in calling them bad, but the system doesn't work, certainly not for the animals. So as an individual, again, I don't like the word consumer. I would love everyone here to never use the word again, because unless we stop saying I'm a consumer and here's consumerism, we can redefine our stories by new words. So as a customer, I don't have to buy beef, not because I want, again, farmers or whatever to suffer, but I can say I am changing a key part of how I live because I love the taste of beef, for instance. To know that in here, a metric at home is I can say, what am I doing? That ask one person actually does make a change. I actually buy a lot of stuff in the States. Me changing my habits over the course of a year, the food that I waste, it's shameful. Shameful how much food I waste. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because I'm really stressed out about it. So accountability at home means talking about climate change. It's talking about it and then asking the question. Here's one thing I talk about a lot, and I know I'm over time, so cut me off if I'm going too long. But what happens if we get to 2030 or 2040 and it turns out the planet is great? Like all these storms were just random. Climate change was fake, and I'm not trying to be political or mocking here. I'm saying what happens if we get there? Great. Like talk about what I'm happy to be wrong about. If my kids and my grandkids and their kids live in a planet where they have enough air to breathe, if everyone in India, and I'm being very general since India is so massive, has clean sanitation, for instance, if the clouds of debris that currently float over most of India, that America frankly created most of it, if that just disappeared, kind of oh, look, there it's gone. Look at that. It was there. Did you see that? You've seen the photos, right? Of massive parts of India. Sorry to be so obvious because you're there. I'm just looking at pictures, but the sun's setting and you can't see it. It's a different color because of smog and trash in the air. What? How can any engineer or scientist or a person working with data be look at that. The sun is blocked out by soot. Oh, well, let's build this technology and try not to have more negative emissions. That's not the answer. That's not going to get us there. And certainly, what about the children not having sanitation? Now I am getting mad. I get passionate because what? Anyway, so back to your personal accountability question is also, you have to get angry at the people. Don't get angry. I'm never going to advocate, something except peace, but certainly is to say vote and only vote for people who are going to protect the children and protect the planet. And if someone's like, well, we can't get there yet, the answer is no. Stop talking. We have to. There's no answer left. There's none left. There's none. If someone's like, but John, it's impossible to get to 2030, I'm not giving the answer. I live in New Jersey. There was an ice storm yesterday. Ice falling on harming people. So the accountability is also, we have to fight, but fight not violence. Fight to say to our political leaders and our business leaders, listen, hey, everybody, maybe you don't realize this, so I don't want to come at you with anger or judgment and say you're hiding something or you're greedy. Okay, if you are, you aren't. That's kind of not the point. The point is, remember the sun's being blocked out? The sun is blocked out. See that, scientists, politicians, government? The sun's blocked out. So if it's blocked out, you're evil or good? I don't really care. GDP is something you think works? I don't really care. How do we get the sun to be seen? How do we get the sun to come out? How do we get the sun to warm our faces? And how do we get those children who haven't seen the sun yet? I've seen the sun. I'm 53. I grew up with relative, not all the pollution. But now the children don't even know what that means, and their air is being taken from their lungs. Why do we even have these conversations? Not this conversation. I'm honored to be here. Why are we having these conversations? Why are people polite? Why? Let me raise my hand and give scientific facts about the sun is blocked. Look right there. Open the windows. Have meetings outside. Like what? We have till 2030. I'm okay if everyone's like, wow, that guy drank a little coffee and he got really intense. It is not about this. It is the fact that I see the sun being blocked out and I want my kids to see the sun. That's it. And the sun should be on our faces. Vitamin D, helping our physical selves. The kids in India and around the world should be able to drink water, go to the bathroom in ways where they're safe and healthy. That's it. I'm not interested in 200, 300 people owning 6 more boats, if I can speak the truth. Not interested in that anymore. I'm not interested in people saying, well, we have to be careful. No, we don't. Not about making more of the system that's led to this. We don't. We weren't careful before. So I'm trying not to be angry at individual people, but I am enraged at the system. Why? Because who would not be? If the answer was, hey, we're doing something, somebody's doing something that's leading to the annihilation of all of the future children of the planet. Okay, well, it's going to be hard to fight against the system, but I like that system where I guess there'll be, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people who will be around. And I'm okay with the planet being decimated. Nope. And now I'm going to, again, switch because I'm late here. The story right now in human history, to go, wait a second, in peace, in connection, in joy, we all started to say, how does this thing change? And the systems that are here aren't working. And then the stories we can tell. Wow, that is, I can't wait. Won't be about me. It'll be about us. Adita and Kayushi, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your names, the influence that you have as 2 individuals and the students that you are saying to IEEE or the people around you, not John's message, the message of Planet Positive, of this is what has to happen, and say, listen, the priority on all these other technologies, which are fantastic, we can keep talking about those technologies or the projects you're doing, but how are they being measured? What does success mean for my life as a student, for the technology we build? And really ask people, push them. What does success mean? Well, success is if the technology works. Yeah, but what does success mean when the technology goes to someone's hands? Well, it means this. How are you measuring that? How are you measuring the mental health of the person holding that technology? And if the answer is, I don't know, why don't you know? I don't think it's important. It is important. The isolation and loneliness and depression is killing people right now, 2022. Do you not know that as a designer, as an engineer? And do you think you can say, well, it's not my job? It is your job. You're building something that's going to someone's house, but you don't have to do it alone. You shouldn't do it alone. You're one person, you're one discipline. So have the wonderful opportunity to bring in those social scientists and the young people. I'll say you guys who I'm looking at, right? Aditya and Kayushi. Not because it's a nice thing to do and let's talk to the students. You're the ones that are living on this planet when I'm gone. You should be able to be you're obviously wonderfully polite and bright and smart and taking initiative, but you're also allowed to say, hey, IEEE or whoever else, respectfully, no. We hear what you're saying. Great. I mean, thank you. You have wisdom. You've been around for a while, but you're talking in the system, the paradigm of the now. And I think you're trying to fix things in the now. The now is now the past. It has to be. And we demand respectfully and with joy a new future. And then as someone my age, especially men, won't shut up. I mean, I can't stop talking even now, right? But if we don't shut up and say the women, the young people, the LGBT community, marginalized, whoever that normally you never even see, where are the I can't tell you how many calls I've been on talking about the need for more women on panels where it's all men talking. We should have more women on panels. Yeah, there's no women on the call. What? How is that good science or good design? I'm not saying that the men on the call are not worthy and wonderful or that their intentions aren't to have women. I'm just saying there aren't any women there. So how is that equitable, you know? Anyway, I'm talking over and you probably have another speaker, so I should honor that.
No, Ishit, sir, your answer was truly great, sir.
Yes, sir. So our next question is from Malai Bhavsar. It's true that to have is it true to that to have a lockdown of 1 year will lead to boost the healing of environment by twice or even thrice?
Like, has a lockdown helped in healing the environment?
Well, it's a great question, Malay. And if I mispronounce names, forgive me. I'd like to at least try, and if I get the name wrong, let me know and I'll correct it. I depending on where you're talking about, India versus the United States, in general, I would say that statistic is right. Now, I should say in general, I'd have to check it, but just by the nature of how many flights, diminished over the last number of years because of COVID, definitively, yeah, the scientists are saying, look how quickly also, this is what's so exciting about the planet, how quickly healing happens from the planet. Really watch that movie, Kiss the Ground. I really hope, obviously you speak English so you can watch it, but I'm hoping it's translated into multiple languages, not just for, dialects or in India, but in Spanish. And it's so joyous watching this desert, just brown, hard earth. And then in the United States, there's a guy who does regenerative farming, where it's, for instance, they don't till the ground. The science, the technology is fascinating. Instead of digging into the ground too deep, it's a tractor that just sort of pushes the ground and puts the seeds in. And what that does is, even when the ground is this brown, mottled clay, it brings back the topsoil, which then means the biomes. I'm getting it wrong. I'm still early here where I am. The living organisms in the topsoil start to have this wonderful, miraculous rebirth and push down into the lower soil. It becomes soil. And this guy in the US, I think it was in it's remarkable how fast it is. 3, 5 years, 6 years. The before picture, desert, brown. The after picture, green, lush. And food, healthy food is being grown, multiple different types of vegetables and whatever else. And then the sort of solutions aspect, back to your issue about if we had a lockdown is a very complex issue because of the economics, right? We all need jobs, et cetera. So I'm not trying to say with exponential growth, again, that profits are bad. We have to earn money or we have to have food. But the exciting thing is the amount of the world's surface that is now desert, that in 3 or 4 years can be transformed, means that where people are given jobs right now to help with that regenerative farming, obviously they need 3 or 4 years to eat food from that part of the planet, the earth. But that means the lockdown could facilitate that. So it's a systems thinking mindset, right? Where the lockdown, also how goods are traded and all that. I'm not trying to say let's cut the global supply chain, but also eating local, having a community local. That's another way the lockdown has been really helpful for a lot of people, because you go, and by the way, we're moving towards the climate emergency. If anyone says we're not in a climate emergency, they are not scientists. They are not looking to the people who measure the stuff constantly. So sorry if I'm going to catch flack for that. There's no one that can say this is not a climate emergency. This is beyond 911. This is, holy crap, we are really hurling towards an inevitable thing. So that's also why aspects of recognizing that in 5 or 10 or 20 years, doomsday sayers or not, you won't be able to get. Right now, I can't order things from around different parts of the world because of COVID and because of supply chain issues. Right now in 2022, oh my gosh, I can't get, a steak from Bangladesh, from cattle from Bangladesh. I'm making this face, not because Bangladesh, I don't know what beef comes from Bangladesh, but the point being, it may be great, But there's cattle grown in, not grown, there's cattle that live in New Jersey. I live in New Jersey. Why would I buy or pay for beef that comes from Bangladesh when I have it in New Jersey? I'm not putting down aspects of that whole system, but I pretty soon will have to have, if we keep going the way we do, multiple ways to get food and water and other supplies locally, because I literally won't be able to get them. So that's another aspect, back to your question about what could a lockdown help. A lot of factors to that. But under the current system, where jobs only come in one way, in a certain way, it won't really work, I don't think. It'll help the planet, but the lockdown has to be with the mindset of, but how do we change all these systems so that the jobs in one place can maybe facilitate someone in America does a job which then helps someone in India, right? That's a systems thinking mindset. So it certainly is a need, but the shutdown is not necessarily the economic shutdown. It has to be a shutdown of the systems that led us to where we are.
Truly said, sir. I think we won't be able to take any more questions, sir, because of the time constraints. But if anyone has further questions for sir, his LinkedIn link is given in the description box. You can send him further more questions. And if you want anything else, you can also ask him over there, sir. And sir, thank you for your time. And we are again really grateful to you, sir, that you have woken up at 4:30 in the morning, sir, and you have come over here, sir. Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
so much, sir.
My pleasure.
It was great to talk to you, sir.
And it was a great session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.